Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Such a Witch by Celia Kyle and Marina Maddox, narrated by Kendall Taylor. 1. Aurora Rhonelle stood in front of her bedroom mirror, patting under her eyes. Were they puffy? They looked puffy to her. In the wake of their very public engagement, her roommate Kelly Holloway and Kelly's gargoyle mate, Ronan Fluvog, hadn't gotten much sleep the night before. And thanks to their nocturnal celebrations, Aurora was willing to bet nobody else in the house had either. She certainly hadn't. Still, that was no reason she shouldn't look her best. Stepping back, she admired the fitted pink jacket and teal pencil skirt she was wearing. Swiveling so she could see the back, Aurora smiled to herself over the little dart she had added to make it hug her rump just a little bit more closely. Never one to go out of her way to call attention to her shape, she still took a bit of pride in her curves. Smart, she thought, looking very smart indeed. With that, she patted the pearls at her throat, tucked away a hair that was ever so slightly askew, and set off to meet the day. As soon as she was in the hallway, she could hear the good-natured laughter filtering up from the kitchen. Even with the very late night, everyone seemed to be up early and chipper. The whole of Hollow House felt bright and welcoming, to the point where Aurora wondered if the house itself was enhancing the light streaming through its windows, just to give a little lift to the celebratory energy buzzing from the previous night's excitement. The engagement, that is, not the noisy, private celebration that followed. As a sentient house, it certainly had its fair share of quirks. All I can say is anybody who misses out on this party is gonna regret it for the rest of their fucking lives. Kelly sat curled on Ronan's lap at the kitchen table, looking every bit like she had been born there. Language, Aurora said with her usual genial mildness as she walked into the kitchen. At her presence, the table expanded ever so slightly to make room for her. I hope everyone slept well. Small chance of that, their other roommate Tiffany Euphora said, shaking cereal into her bowl by the sink. She cut a sly glance over her shoulder, and Kelly descended into a fit of blushing giggles, digging her nose into Ronan's shoulder. Sorry. I'm not, Ronan said through a contented grin. If we're keeping you up, you should just ask the house to soundproof your walls. Huh? Aurora said, getting the milk out for Tiffany. I hadn't thought of that. She made her way to the counter and got a bowl for herself, filling it with the sugar-free granola clusters she thrived on. You could try moving it to the basement, Nathan de Orlock said. I didn't hear a thing. The resident vampire had emerged from his personal dungeon, shirtless as ever, and the world was a better place for it. The moment he emerged from the dark stairwell, the house slammed the heavy curtains across the windows, blocking all sunlight and amping up the illumination from the overhead fixtures. Kelly snickered. Yeah, well, I'd say your attention was otherwise occupied. Fair enough, he said with a smirk. Nathan, Kelly, and Ronan shared a private laugh. Aurora looked at Tiffany, who just raised her eyebrows and settled herself at the table with a shrug. Nathan pitched himself into a chair and sprawled with the lazy ease of the eternally handsome. Aurora had long since stopped being abashed by his perpetual partial nudity. At first, it had put her into a state of constant embarrassment, but that period had thankfully passed. Still, she couldn't help stealing the odd glance at his chiseled torso, not to mention his leather-clad buns. Even if he wasn't exactly her type, it was hard to argue that he wasn't aesthetically pleasing. You're looking sharp, Aurora, Kelly said with genuine appreciation. How do you do it every day? You must get up at 5 or something. Only then did Aurora notice that the rest of her roommates were still clad in their disheveled pajamas. I don't get up at 5, she said, blowing on a fresh cup of coffee as though Kelly were being ridiculous. Of course, she wasn't going to admit her alarm was set for 5:15. Aurora was usually showered, dressed, and out the door before any of the household had even hit snooze for the first time. Well, whatever routine you've got, I want some pointers. You look amazing. I like you just the way you are. Ronan planted a kiss behind Kelly's ear, earning him a delighted squeal. I'm serious. The gal has fashion sense out the wazoo, and clearly the scratch to back it up. Maybe you can put in a word for me at the judiciary. I could use a well-paying gig. Most of it is thrifted, actually. The words were out of her mouth in a flash, and she almost blushed at herself. You're kidding, Tiffany said as Aurora slid in beside her. No way. Now that it was the focus of attention, Aurora had no choice but to soldier on and render her secrets. It's true. Careful thrifting and consignment shopping. I've got an eye for a bargain. Plus, I tailor things myself so it fits the way I want. It's not that hard, really. Damn, Kelly's jaw was slack. Well, whatever you're doing, keep it up. I've always heard it said, dress for the job you want, not the job you're getting paid for. So why not? She blew on her coffee again and took a sip. You should hear the rest of the junior investigators complaining about having to dress business casual. If it weren't for the dress code, they'd all be in jeans and t-shirts. Maybe you should campaign for that. Nathan had that unreadable cryptic look on his face again. You'd really stand out then, huh? Uh-huh. Aurora turned her attention to her breakfast, doing her best to keep his snark from getting under her skin. I'd say you're not only dressing for it, babe. Kelly leaned forward from Ronan's lap and rapped twice on the table. You're working for it, too. In early and out late. Is anybody else even there to notice the hours you're putting in? I like to think they notice. Her voice was quiet. With all the excitement in the house, how was it possible that Aurora now found herself the center of the conversation? It wasn't exactly a position she was comfortable with. Thankfully, Kelly's flighty heart was ready to move on. See if you can tear yourself away before midnight tonight, would ya? Because our engagement party is going to be lit. It'll be just what you need to loosen up a bit. Let your hair down and get your freak on. Loosen up. Nathan cracked out a dry, lethargic laugh. This one? Not likely. She couldn't let loose if she wanted to. A laugh rippled over the table, and Aurora's cheeks burned. Nathan let the chuckle drive him even further. Shit, she's wound so tight, springs are about to pop out of her ears. Now everybody laughed in earnest. As much as she hated being the center of attention, being the butt of the joke was even worse. Without meaning to, she found herself clenching her hands into tight little fists. A tiny prickle of energy shot up from the tight ball in her stomach, down her arms, and lit out into the room. Nobody else felt it. They were too busy laughing at her expense. Before she even realized it was happening, a half-decomposed mouse sprang onto the table, skittering for Nathan at full steam and leaving a wake of little tailbones with every step. It leapt on the leg of Nathan's leather pants, darted up his bare chest and into his thick, wavy dark hair. He scrambled to his feet with a squawk, and suddenly the whole table was alight with new laughter. Before he could brush it away, the skeletal little devil hunkered down and pooped right on top of his head. In its half-skeletal state, it was mostly dust, but still, everyone went wild. Well, everyone except Nathan and Aurora. Most times, he was chilled to the point of being nearly comatose, but now the vamp was shaking with real anger. For her part, Aurora kept her eyes fixed on the table. This was why she worked so hard to keep her emotions in check. Her necromantic powers were unpredictable, and she had a habit of unintentionally reanimating things when she was emotional. She hadn't meant to revive the little rodent, but it had damn sure acted out her heart's desire. Damn it, Aurora, Nathan groused, doing what he could to flick the little pebbles of poop out of his hair. You did that on purpose. I'm sorry, she said simply and sincerely. I didn't mean to. Oh, ha ha, tell me another. Really, she said, standing up to face him. I didn't. It just happens sometimes. I'm truly sorry. And she was. Mostly. Thank the goddess no one asked if she didn't take just a little secret delight in zombie mouse vengeance, because she was a terrible liar. Even so, Nathan's flash of anger went out as quickly as it came. Not that he was happy about it, but at least the fire in his electric blue eyes had gone out. He plopped back into his chair and folded his arms. Yeah, well, even if everyone else had found it a stone-cold riot, Aurora was rattled by the unexpected guest. Whatever they all might think of her, she wasn't as put together as all that. Little things like that happened all the time, and she had to work hard to keep up the pretense of being so well composed, which was, exhausting. Worse, she felt like she couldn't tell anyone about how hard it was to keep up the facade. After all, she had an image to maintain, especially if she wanted to get anywhere in this life, which was only made that much harder because she was a necromancer. Other magicals had strong feelings about necromancers. Not always good. "Anywho," Tiffany said, twinkling her little elfin, kohl-rimmed eyes. "When are your brothers coming for another visit?" At the mere mention of her brothers, Aurora's stomach dropped. "You just want to see the oldest one again. What's his name?" Kelly asked Tiffany, knowing full well what his name was. "Reese," Tiffany sighed happily, drawing out his name like a dream. That brought another round of light chuckles, especially from Kelly. "You got it bad for that one." "Maybe," Tiffany blushed, making her pale face contrast even more with the purple streaks threading through her dyed black hair. It seemed downright incongruous for such a dark goth to behave like a love-struck schoolgirl. "No maybe about it," Kelly said. "This little girl wants Reese's Pieces." Again, the whole table came apart. In fact, the table itself shook in appreciation of the joke, coming dangerously close to sloshing milk out of Aurora's bowl and onto her tidy little skirt. "Damn!" Even Nathan was laughing. "Wish I'd thought of that one." Kelly looked proud of her wordplay. "Don't worry about it, Tiff. I texted all of the Rhonelle bros invites to the party tonight. You're welcome." Aurora's eyes darted up at the news. "You invited the boys?" "Are you kidding? I invited all the boys, not just your brothers. So, you're welcome, too." "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God," Tiffany breathed, all but clapping her hands like a kid in a candy store. Little hearts began to circle her head, and a basket of mewling kittens materialized on the table. If Aurora's necromancy manifested itself through random animals coming back to life, then cutesy little tricks were Tiffany's forte, for better or for worse. "Say, Aurora, where's that little mouse now?" Ronan feigned, looking around. One of these little kitties might be hungry. Everyone was in rare form this early in the morning. For her part, Aurora shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't that there was any acrimony between her and her brothers, far from it. She loved her family fiercely. It was just that they actively embraced all of the darkness and gloom of necromancers she had so studiously worked to distance herself from. She didn't even own a single scrap of black clothing. Having them attend their house parties was usually fun, but it only served to remind everyone where she came from, what she was supposed to be. Aurora wanted so much more than that. "Actually," she said, rising from the table, "I ought to get going. Don't want to be late." "Are you serious?" Kelly called after her, but Aurora was already in the hallway heading for the door. In a moment, Kelly was leaning out the kitchen door. Amazing that she had managed to pry herself off Ronan's lap. "Your job doesn't start for another 2 hours. "Still," Aurora tossed back over her shoulder as she pulled the door open. "Whatever," Kelly called. "Maybe you can use going in early as an excuse to leave early for the party. Maybe." Tugging the door shut behind her, Aurora strode down the steps and paused for a second. The air at that time of day was always so crisp, and the sun warmed her cheeks. Honestly, that was as good a reason as any to head out early. After that incredibly brief snatch of pleasure she had allowed herself, Aurora turned her toes and began to walk briskly toward Othercross Judiciary. One of the other maxims she lived by reverberated between her ribs, driving her along the pavement. If you're not early, you're late. 2. The party was already in full swing by the time Aurora got home. But then, it would be. Aurora had stayed at the judiciary until nearly 10, and even leaving then had felt transgressive. Not that anyone but the janitorial staff even knew she was there. She could hear the ruckus before she even turned the corner. All she could do was hope that the neighbors were either very patient or fans of the night sparrows, because Ryan Glittermist's rock tenor was in the midst of serenading the entire street. It was hard to imagine anyone putting up too much of a fuss. They were a great band, but still. maybe she could convince them to wrap up the music before midnight. The lawn was covered with laughing gargoyles smoking cigarettes like they were going out of style and chugging from red plastic cups. Say what you will, but when they weren't made of stone, gargoyles really knew how to party. 3 unicorns still hanging around from Ronan's spectacular proposal to Kelly were grazing on the lawn. The whole atmosphere was equal parts joyous and raucous. Aurora Rhonelle? A timid-looking figure on the sidewalk waved at her. Yes? Thank goodness, the man said. Someone who actually lives here. When she got closer, she recognized Louis Holloway fidgeting with a parcel in his hands. You haven't been in yet? She cocked an eyebrow at the man the Holloway coven had appointed as the executor of Kelly's parents' will, and he offered a nervous smile back. Hollow House and I aren't exactly on the, friendliest terms. Aurora did what she could to stifle her smile, remembering everything the poor guy had been subjected to. Changing the subject seemed like the best course of action, so she pointed to the box in his sweaty palms. Present for the happy couple? Not exactly. It's really a kind of, peace offering. He opened the lid and showed her an ornate, expensive-looking brass knocker. Do you think the house will like it? Let's find out. Linking an arm through his, they trotted up the steps, and Louis held out the box to the door. I, brought you something. In a flash, the box was gone, and the marvelous piece of hardware was attached tightly in place of the center of the door. It knocked 3 times of its own volition, and then the door swung wide and beckoned them in. I'd say you're going to be just fine, Aurora said as they stepped inside. The place was packed to the rafters, and the house had done a beautiful job of expanding the rooms and raising the ceilings to accommodate the numbers. The whole of it was cozy and wild at the same time. Not exactly wanting to sweat through her work clothes, Aurora excused herself and ran up the stairs to her room. Tucking the blazer and skirt neatly away, she stood in her underwear and began pawing through her closet. The house did her the same courtesy it always did, drawing the blinds for her so the neighbors didn't get an eyeful. Thank you, she chirped. In the end, she pulled out a very fetching, pristine white sweater set with hip-hugging slacks. She could show off her figure a bit without giving away the least bit of skin. Besides, the white might help to distance her from her black-clad brothers milling around on the dance floor. Sure enough, when she made it back to the party, there they were. Well, Reese, anyway. As tall as he was easy to spot. That and his signature trench coat leather pants combo, ink black as if he had been poured into them. Well, she mumbled to herself, at least it looks like he left his top hat at home. Dancing as if she were glued to his hip was Tiffany. She beamed up at him as though every quip falling from his great height was pure gold. Together, they were one ebony mass of goth perfection. It dawned on Aurora that they actually made a pretty cute couple after all, even if Reese didn't seem particularly impressed by Tiffany. Oh, he clearly liked her adoring attention, but Tiffany wasn't the only one with eyes only for him. She was just the most persistent. He stole the occasional glimpse around crowd, looking to see who else might be in play. Aurora rolled her eyes at it all. The grass was always greener for Reese. Trent thumped out a grinding bass line. Lorella leaned into the keys, and the Night Sparrows rocketed into one of their best dance numbers. Creatures of every stripe rushed the floor, descending into a euphoric frenzy as Ryan wailed over the din. Taking a deep breath, Aurora strode into the room and did what she did best at parties. Picked up empties. It was a noble job, she liked to think. The party couldn't be more than 2 hours old, and already every available surface was crowded with abandoned bottles and cups. Besides, more than anything, Aurora liked to feel useful, and it would save work the following day. Besides, letting herself get completely wild would probably turn things really weird really fast. How would anyone handle it? All the pent-up party energy lingering inside her would be like a supernova of epic proportions. Chances were that most of the partiers wouldn't consider dancing shoulder to shoulder with zombies the making of a great night. And if Aurora really went nuts, There was no question reanimation would be on the table. Not that she had ever revived a person, to her great frustration. She'd tried a few times, but it always ended in failure, criticism, and a lovely shame spiral. So, in the end, the place would probably just be overrun with zombified animals. And there she'd be, in the center of it all, surrounded by birds, cats, and mice, like some sort of Cinderella of the damned. No, thank you. She bustled through the throng with her armload of empties and pressed her way into the kitchen. It was thick with people living their best lives. Stepping through the back door, she let a cascade of tinkling bottles fall into the recycle bin. It was already half full. "Hey," she said to the house, placing a soft hand on the door jamb. "Could you—" The bin tripled in size, which was probably closer to what the night would need. "Thank you." Brushing the door lightly, she felt it warm under her fingertips. However uncomfortable she felt with people, Hollow House got her. "Really? All white, huh?" Aurora knew it was her brother Duval before she even turned around. That honeyed voice, rich with gentle mockery. He was a true second son, eager to distinguish himself, all while still wanting to please. "Trying just a little too hard, don't you think, sis?" When she turned to face him, she couldn't contain the immediate bark of laughter and clamped a hand over her mouth. "I'm trying too hard? This coming from a man in a cape?" "What?" He shrugged, looking at his shoulders. "You don't like it? At least I'm not trying to hide that I'm a necromancer, unlike some people I could name." He wagged a playful finger in her face, and she batted it away with a good-natured swipe. "I'm not hiding anything, thank you very much. I know exactly who I am, and I'm very happy with it." "Sure," he said, raising his already arched brows. "There's a Shakespeare quote about a lady protesting, but I forget how it goes." Aurora swatted his shoulder again, and he let out a good-natured laugh. "Anyway, we'd really love to have you at the next family dinner. Mom was crushed when you bailed on the last one. And the one before—" "I've been busy," she said, flushing just a little. "You know how demanding my job is." "Demanding is right. You don't seem to have time for anything else." At her sigh, Duval softened a bit. "Look, just try, okay? Mom would love to see you. Hell, we all would." He reached out and put a hand on her shoulder. "I'll try. Of course I will." "That's the spirit," he said, brightening up. "Now, get yourself a drink and live a little. Just a little." With that, he snuck a kiss on her forehead and dove back into the party. Maybe he was right. Maybe a drink or two would be just the thing. And maybe, just maybe, she'd leave the cleaning until tomorrow. With a cold gin and tonic in a plastic cup, she sidled back in to see Ryan and his band howling out in full fashion. His petite wings shimmered from the back of his plush lime-green jacket. It was impossible to dislike someone so outrageously comfortable in his own skin. And there, in the center of the floor, swaying slightly with his eyes fixed on the lead singer, was Nathan. Even the throng of people couldn't coax a stitch of clothing on his upper half. Though he sparkled as though he'd smeared glittery lotion all over his skin, and shirtless as he was probably a damned sight more comfortable than anyone else on the overheated dance floor. Aurora was beginning to regret choosing a sweater of all things, even as light as it was. Thinking back to the escapade with the dead mouse that morning, Aurora felt a pang of remorse. She really needed to apologize more thoroughly to Nathan. Even if it was unintentional, the last thing she wanted was any ill will in the house. So, squaring her shoulders, she made her way through the crowd until she caught his eye. "Hey," she gave a light wave, and he replied with the far cooler version of it. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry about this morning." "What?" He held a hand up to his ear. She raised her voice to try to cut above the music. "I said I'm sorry." "What?" He waved her closer. Stepping through the dancers until she was right beside him, she made another attempt. "I'm sorry about this morning." An almost comical look of surprise filled his face, and his body lurched, as though someone had bumped him, though no one was close enough. And the entire front of her outfit was drenched in bright blue liquid. The chill of it on her skin took her breath away, and her eyes bulged at the neon stain ruining her clothes. Nathan wore a victorious smirk. He'd been trying to get her close enough to do that. "Oops," he said blandly. "Guess we're even now. Besides, maybe now you'll change into something more appropriate for a party than a sock hop." Burning with humiliation, Aurora turned on her heel, only to bump directly into Kelly. "Whoa," Kelly said. "Dig the new look. Very chic." That only frustrated Aurora more. She wanted to get out of that room before someone else coughed up a smart remark. But before she could move, an electric, magical tingle, unlike anything she had ever felt, sang through her entire body. The whole room seemed to shiver. Looking wildly around her, she searched for the source of the sensation. Someone was here, and she needed to see them. And there he was. Standing just in the entry to the main room was a man with dark blonde hair and kind brown eyes she could feel in her core. A wolf shifter. It was impossible to say how she knew that, but she did with a diamond-hard certainty. He spoke to an older man. Kelly whistled through her teeth, snapping Aurora out of her trance. "Who's the new guy? What a hunk!" I don't know. I have no idea," Aurora stammered. "The older man he's talking to is a triune judge, though." "That's right!" Kelly snapped her fingers and chucked Aurora's shoulder. "Old judgy boy asked for a +1, said he'd bring his replacement or something. Something about going on vacation. I wasn't really listening." She took a hard pull from the full bottle of whiskey in her hand. Aurora wasn't really listening either. Her gaze was fixed on the handsome shifter next to Judge Bedlow. Then something about him changed. He froze in place, ignoring his companion, and sniffed lightly at the air. Blinking rapidly, his eyes grew wide, and he cast away any pretense of manners and quite blatantly sniffed. With searching eyes, he hunted through the crowd, undoubtedly seeking the source of whatever he scented. A thrill in Aurora's stomach told her she needed to hide from him, but she couldn't have said why if a gun was held to her head. Trouble was, she had no way to escape the dance floor without him spotting her. She needed a diversion, and she needed it now. "Whoa, what the hell?" Nathan's voice came louder than anyone had ever heard it. The whole room stopped, and even the band faltered. Whatever super cool version of dancing he had just been doing was long gone. Instead, his feet set to tap dancing like he was auditioning for a Broadway show. "What the fuck?" he cried as his body moved lithely. "Language," Aurora muttered absently, barely above a whisper. Everyone watched his killer moves. High kicks, jazz hands, barrel rolls. He was really going for it, all without the benefit of music. Lorella began to tickle at her keyboard, sliding from a night sparrow's rocker to some good old-fashioned ragtime. Ryan howled with laughter. "Lorella, cut that shit out! Somebody help me!" It was the most heated Aurora had ever seen him, but it didn't make sense that he'd need someone to help him. Then it hit her. She was doing it. Somehow, she was forcing Nathan to dance. Anytime she thought about a particular step, he copied the image in her mind. She had no idea how she was doing it or, even worse, how to make it stop. All she knew was that it was exactly the diversion she needed. The crowd had closed in on Nathan, including the handsome stranger who barely even glanced in his direction, but the mass of bodies hid her exit nicely. As she passed their closest point of approach, her nose caught a strong, intoxicating whiff of him. Who needed gin when you could have that? Looking back one last time as she hurried outside, she drank in every drop of the man before losing sight of him in the throng. She didn't know who he was, but she wanted to find out more than anything. Well, except running away, that is. 3. "All right, who's the joker who took the evidence file from my top drawer?" Fisher had been in the judiciary for nearly half an hour, but had only just managed to settle into his workstation. His question was met with stifled giggles, and Aurora looked around the room at her fellow junior investigator.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?